Hello, everyone. I'm seeing a lot of discussions and conversations in the interpreting groups about the pass and fail rates for tests, and I've been trying to keep up and share information, but it doesn't seem to be getting to the folks who need to see it. So I figured that I would make a post with everything that someone should know regarding testing. Now, before we get into that, I should tell you a little bit about me and why I'm able to speak on this topic. I completed formal research training at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, where my work required comprehensive coursework in assessment theory and application. This included instruction in standardized assessments such as intelligence tests, aptitude measures, and other psychometric tools, as well as graduate level training and in the development and evaluation of assessment instruments. As part of this work, I earned the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative, CITI certification, which is the national standard for anyone who is conducting research or program evaluation involving human participants. That CITI program provides rigorous training in research ethics, regulatory compliance, responsible conduct of research, and conflict of interest management. CITI certification demonstrates proficiency in safeguarding sensitive data, conducting research ethically, and adhering to federal and institutional standards for human subjects protection. Now, combined with my graduate coursework, this training equipped me to design and analyze research studies, interpret statistical outputs, and calculate key psychometric indicators, including standard deviations, reliability coefficients, and other metrics essential to evaluating the quality and defensibility of assessments. So, now does this make me an expert on all things testing? No, but it does give me the education and practical experience to be able to explain why testing standards are important. So now that that formality is out of the way, let's talk about testing. Not feelings about testing, not pass rates, not rumors or opinions, but the actual science of testing. Because in the real world, the test is only good if it is valid and reliable. Everything else is just noise and distraction. So the first thing that we look at is the validity, and that just means, does the test measure the right thing? So think of it like this. If you want to know your weight, then you would step on a scale. You wouldn't grab a thermometer and say, oh, it says 98.6 degrees, so I must weigh that much, because that would be ridiculous, and that's what invalid measurement looks like. So a test is valid only if it measures the skills that it claims to measure. And how do we make sure of that? So one of the ways that we make sure that a test is valid and it's measuring the skills it claims to measure is by doing a job task analysis. So if we're testing for a skill, we need to know what that skill is. So a job task analysis, or a JTA, is just basically a giant survey and research project to figure out first what interpreters actually do, how often they do it, and how important those tasks are. So if a test measures stuff that interpreters don't actually do, then it's invalid. And if it doesn't measure stuff that interpreters do, also invalid. Other evidence of validity would include things like expert reviews, linkage studies, blueprint mapping, content analysis. There's a whole way to do that. And you don't need to know the names of all that. You just need to know that validity means that we're measuring the right thing. So the next thing that we take a look at is what's called reliability, which means, does the test measure what it's measuring consistently? And here's an easy way to think of that. So if I want to know my weight, I would step on a scale, right? We know that. We use a valid test, a valid instrument. And if I get on the scale and it says that I'm 160 pounds, when I get on the scale tomorrow, it should say about 160 pounds. It might say 161, it might say 159, whatever. But it should be in the same ballpark. If I step on the scale tomorrow and it says 120 pounds, then that scale is broken. That is an unreliable measurement. So the test has to give stable, consistent, predictable scores. Otherwise, the test is garbage. So there are a few different ways to check reliability. The first way to check for reliability is by doing something that's looking at retest reliability. So you would take the same test twice, and if the scores swing wildly for no reason, that test is unreliable. So here's an example. If I take a test and my score is 500, and then the next time I take the test and my score is 300, that's a drastic drop in scores. And if there's no reason for this drop, like a medical, whatever, then that would indicate that reliability is not there. There's math that's done to come up with what's called a retest reliability coefficient. And you don't need to know the math, only that the coefficient is between 0 and 1. And the closer it is to 1, ideally over 0.8, the more reliable the test is. The closer it is to 0, the more it indicates that the test is not reliable and therefore not a good instrument. The next thing we look at for reliability is what's called inter-rater reliability. So in any given test, there should be, you have different evaluators or scorers. So you have two qualified scorers looking at the same performance. If one gives somebody 500 and the other gives somebody 200, then one of them is wrong or the scoring system is broken. Again, there's math that is done to come up with what's called the inter-rater reliability coefficient. And again, you don't need to know the math, only that the coefficient is between 0 and 1. And the closer to 1, ideally, again, over 0.8, the more reliable the test is. The closer to 0, the more it indicates that the test is not reliable and therefore not a good instrument. Another way that we test for reliability is what's called Cronbach's alpha. It's a fancy statistical way to check and see if all of the questions work together. Cronbach's alpha is a measurement of internal consistency that tells you how well a set of questions on a test or survey measure the same underlying concept. So think of it as a way to see if all of your questions are working together or if some measurement, or if they're measuring something different. For example, think of like a test as a playlist of songs that are all supposed to fit one mood. If the playlist has songs that all match the same vibe, if it's, musicals or country music or whatever, then the playlist feels coherent and consistent. That would be a high Chromebox alpha. But if the playlist jumps from lullabies to heavy metal music to Christmas music to movie soundtracks, even though it's supposed to be a workout playlist, then the playlist is all over the place, and that would indicate a low Chromebox alpha. So Chromebox alpha tells us whether all of the questions on the test belong together and measure the same overall skill or idea. Again, you don't need to do the math. You don't have to know how to do all of that. You just need to know that a high alpha equals a consistent test and a low alpha equals a trash test. Okay, so another concept in testing to understand is what's called cut scores. And cut scores are is where the pass level is. And it's how test developers determine what constitutes a passing score. So a passing score cannot be determined by vibes and emotions or politics or pass-fail rates or how hard the test feels this year or whatever. None of those things indicate passing, how they determine a passing score. Cut scores are normally set using standard methods like Angoff, bookmark, modified, Abel, Hofstede. These are all names that you don't need to memorize. Just know that cut scores are set by trained experts using structured methods so that the passing point is fair and defensible. So there's math and data that goes into determining cut scores. So the thing that I want to really emphasize here is what I'm seeing a lot of folks talking about in the interpreting groups, and that is the pass-fail rates. It's really important to understand that pass-fail rates mean absolutely nothing about test quality, okay? I'm going to repeat that again because it's really important to emphasize this. The pass-fail rates tell you absolutely nothing about whether a test is good. A test is good if it has good validity, reliability, all of that, what we just talked about. The pass-fail rates don't tell you anything about the quality of the test. A high pass rate doesn't mean the test is good, and a low pass rate doesn't mean the test is good. Pass and fail rates will mostly tell you how well people prepared, how seriously candidates study, how much training they had, or how they aligned their preparation in what the test measures. That's it. If the test is not valid and it's not reliable, then the pass-fail rate is meaningless. It's totally irrelevant. A test has to be valid and reliable first. Those things have to be proved first. And then you can talk about the pass-fail numbers and how those should be interpreted. But you need to have a valid and reliable test first. It really doesn't matter how well somebody prepares for the test. They can go to every training that is under the sun, and they can study very seriously. But if the test is not valid or reliable, then those things that they're doing are pointless. So you have to, the very first thing is you have to make sure that the test is valid and reliable. Okay, so how should testing actually work? So there are best practices. And these best practices can be confirmed with NCCA, which is the National Commission for Certifying Agencies. And you can also confirm it with ICE, which is the Institute for Credentialing Excellence. So this is standard. These are standard practices that the exam owners should be collecting data in-house. They need to be collecting and calculating the reliability coefficients. Like I said, the inter-rater reliability, the test-retest reliability, they should be calculating that in-house. They should also be calculating validity evidence, Cronbach's alpha, score distributions, cut score analyses. That all should be done in-house by the exam owners, so the people that own the test. And they do this with trained psychometricians who work for the organization, not for the testing vendor or whoever developed, like if they develop the test out, externally. So this should all be done in-house. And then once that is done, they send that data to a completely independent third party. They don't send it to the test developer. They don't send it to a scoring company or the vendor that's selling the exam, for example. They have to send it to a third party, independent reviewer, because you don't want a conflict of interest by sending your data to the people that developed the test or helped develop the test, because then they're telling you that their own test is great. That's a conflict of interest. No one verifies their own homework, and the test developers shouldn't be verifying their own validity and reliability and all of those data. Sometimes that data is sent to, for example, an institution of higher learning, some type of post-secondary entity. I know that, for example, the BEI has their data verified by a university. The EIPA has had their data verified by an independent university. So an independent psychometric firm or university would check things like whether the calculations are correct, whether the methods follow industry standards, whether the test meets legal defensibility requirements, and whether anything looks biased or statistically suspicious. The third step in this process is that the verified metrics must be published annually. Every legitimate credentialing organization does this. Annual psychometrics reports exist so that candidates know how the test is fair, the public can trust the credential, employers understand what the scores mean, and the organization remains legally defensible. This is standard practice across fields like nursing, interpreting, law, education, medicine, psychology. Every real profession with real exams follow this process and publish their data, their psychometrics every year. If the metrics are not verified and they're not published, then the test cannot claim defensibility. It's that simple. So this was a lot of information, and I'm happy to help answer any questions. But in the spirit of trust and verify, I encourage you to talk with experts in testing about the things that I've talked about here. Testing is a science, and science needs to be replicated and duplicated, basically making sure that something is not a one-off. I'm telling you these things here in this video, but I'm asking you to check and verify with someone who understands testing. Please contact NCCA or ICE if you know somebody that's a testing expert, like an actual testing expert, published, if they have a body of works under their name, and so on. But the point is that testing is a science. It's not about pass rates. it's not about feelings or opinions. It's about three things. It's about validity. Are we measuring the right thing? It's about reliability. Are we measuring it consistently? And it's about transparency. Are the numbers calculated correctly and shared publicly? If those three things are not in place, the test is not defensible. If they are in place, then people can trust the results, whether they pass or not. That a pass result actually reflects their ability and not something random or biased. And a fail reflects gaps in competency and not just reflecting a flawed test. So that's what I'm hoping to help folks understand with this video. And hopefully this gives more information so we know how to have these conversations moving forward. Thank you so much.